Yo, what's up, comrades? Hope everyone's doing well. We're on to the Phoenix Rises. Yes, the beloved Phoenix from the X-Men franchise. This is where it all begins. Um, the Phoenix Rises arc. So go ahead and like, subscribe, comment, share, whatever. All right, so here we go. So it's Christmas time for the X-Men in New York City, and they're all at what's that thing called? Rockefeller Square, I think. I have been there. It's got the giant Christmas tree and the statue of something. Anyway, everyone's having a jolly old time. They're all chit chatting, and Scott and Jean are smoochy, and then we see Kurt and what's his name? Peter. They're hitting on these cute girls, and Moira and Banshee. What's his name? It's not Scott. There's no way. And whatever Banshee's name is, they're all smoochy, and Wolverine's like, I hate Christmas. what a Grinch. And Aurora's like, it snows. It's always snowing on Mount Kilimanjaro. And Jean's like, okie dokie. So Scott and Jean are going on a date, and they're all smoochy, and then dun dun dun, they get attacked by the Sentinels. Oh no! They fight them off, but then Cyclops gets knocked off out of this building, and Jean gets gas sprayed and captured. Then Banshee goes to rescue them, and Wolverine tags along, and so they fly up and they attack a Sentinel. Banshee gets snacked, and then Wolverine gets smacked through a bunch of buildings and a water tower, and also smacked. Meanwhile, Storm also transforms and heads up to rescue Scott, and then Scott gets shot by a Sentinel, and then Storm takes care of it, and then he's like, oh no, what are we going to do? Professor X, something. And so we go to Professor X, and he's chilling with his super homie. What's this guy's name? Peter Corbeau, that's his name. And they're out fishing, and then, the professor's like, oh, something weird is happening. And then a Sentinel pops out of the water out with his fishing pole. And so he destroys that one, or knocks him out with his telepathy, and then he gets assaulted by Lilandria, who we don't know that's who it is yet. It's just some alien thing. Sentinel comes, destroys the ship, grabs Professor X, and then Corbeau is kind of up Schitt's Creek without a paddle out in the ocean. Then we get some kind of new stuff. And when I say new stuff, remember we're reading through classic X-Men, so it's not the original Uncanny X-Men. And Kurt is hitting on this girl, Amanda, who we find out later. I mean, that's his long-term lover and also his, kind of adopted sister. It's not creepy, though. Don't worry about it. We also get Peter looking at the ballet, and he sees Anya from, his little extra series while he's, flirting with this other girl. We then, let's see. Oh, then Moira is tracking them down. She tracks them down and is like, hey guys, she's got this funny device that's mutant contact established, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, hey guys, we gotta go. We got some stuff to do. And then we just switch back over to the X Mansion where Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Storm are getting some rage out in the X room, or in the danger room, while Cyclops is using Cerebro to search for his companions. None of this is included in the original Uncanny X-Men run, by the way. So then we get, I think her name's, it's not Serene, it's Selena, something like that. She's a mutant that can sense other mutants who, there's a lot of BS with this, a lot of retcon with this character. She's worked for the Hellfire Club for a long time. She didn't in the original, Phoenix Rising arc, but she's here because she shows up later, and then she was a secret plant from Professor X the whole time. Kind of stupid bullshit. But then we, for the first time, we meet Shaw, who is the head of the Hellfire Club. He's the Black King or whatever it is. And he's like, aha, we got that asshole to use the Sentinels to get the X-Men out of here because they were a threat to us. And I feel like it diminishes the overall story with that kind of bullshit, but it is what it is. There it is. So then we go to what we will soon find out is outer space, where Banshee, Wolverine, Jean, and Professor X are all being held captive by that douchebag, Dr. Lang. And then Wolverine is taunting him, and he's taunting back, and then he does something to Jean. He smacks her, and then Wolverine all right, I've had enough. So he busts out and kills a bunch of dudes, and the Sentinels come, and he kills him, and then he rescues Banshee and Jean, and then Jean's she starts tearing her dress, and Logan's like, what you doing, Red? And she's like, I gotta be able to run and keep up with you guys. And then Wolverine's like, I help you, and he just tears her skirt all the way up to her panties. And then she's like, thank you very much, I think. And he's like, ha ha ha, you're welcome. then he's like, let's get out of here. And Jean's like, we gotta get Professor X. And Wolverine's like, nah, we gotta get the rest of the X-Men. Let's go. We can come back later. And so she gets mad at him, but then a Sentinel shows up, so Banshee blasts him, and then there's a whole bunch of them, and they just beat the shit out of him. And one of them, I think it's Jean, makes a comment like, these guys are not very strong compared to how they were in the past. Finally, Banshee grabs Jean and Wolverine, and they blast their way out into, dun dun dun, outer space. Before we find out it's outer space, we go back to Cyclops, who's like confused. He's like, I have used Cerebro to search the entire Earth twice to figure out where these people are. And then they notice an intruder alert, and Kurt goes to nab him, and he comes back, and it's Corbo, Dr. Peter Corbo. He survived the ocean. And he's like, no, they're not on Earth, you idiots. They're in space. The side story we get at the end is just like a cute little pre-date from like the beginning of the issue with Jean, where we just see her walking around using her powers. We see like naked Jean from the back, which is hot, and then bathtub Jean, which is also hot. And then she sees like a note from Misty talking about this date, and then she does like this creepy dance with like an empty shell. She pulls out a picture, or she has a picture of her with her parents, but then she puts it away and takes out a picture of her and Scott, because, you know, it's like her new family or whatever, because she wants to get married. And he picks her up, they kissy kiss, and they head on out. And then we get like a little image of a Sentinel coming in to like bash through her window, and then we get like an ominous shot of like this opera called The Phoenix. No need to worry about the X-Men, though, because the Sentinels come to their rescue by putting them in like little environments or something. Cyclops and Dr. Corbo, meanwhile, figure out that they're up in space and they need to head there. So Dr. Corbo uses his vast wealth to get them on a space shuttle that's going up immediately to the space station. So they all sneak on board, and we hear about like mutant riots, and we learn about Judge Chalmers, who becomes relevant later on for being an anti-mutant guy. Then we get some more stories. So Storm is stuck in a spacesuit in a spaceship, and she's a bit claustrophobic, so that's not super fun for her. But even worse is Colossus. We find out that he had an older brother, Mikkel, who was a cosmonaut, and that he died in a space craft accident. And so he kind of has like a little panic attack and bursts through his suit and has a pretty rough go at things. But everything else goes well. They go up into space. We find out this solar storm is causing a lot of problems. But that, you know, they'll be okay. Meanwhile, back in jolly old Scotland, or something, yeah, I think it is Scotland, this lawyer, Flattery, is getting a letter delivered to Sean Cassidy / the Banshee. And when he comes out of delivering the letter, he runs into Black Tom, and Black Tom kills him. And he's like, oh, my cousin will do nothing to stop me. Then we get some of the bonus content from the classic run, which is where the Hellfire Club is more deeply embedded with Stephen Lang, who's the guy with the Sentinel issue. And so he's talking to the Hellfire Club heads and discussing about, and like Sean, not Sean, like, Shaw, that's his name. Shaw. And we meet this guy, Ned, who's the current White King. And Shaw, we find out, is new money, and Ned is like old money, and that Shaw's still under like a probationary state to be part of the Hellfire Club. But they chit-chat a little bit, and Ned is kind of giving Shaw the runaround in that Lang is claiming to all the group that they're isolating the X Factor so they can create more mutants or more powers, but in reality, Ned wants to eliminate all mutants. All right, back into space. Corbo tries to land at the space station, and we found out it's like an old SHIELD space station. But then Lang is like, no, go fuck yourself. Wait, there's mutants on there? Destroy them. So then they get attacked by a bunch of Sentinels. Storm gets whipped out into space, and Colossus begins to gasp for air because there's a hole blown in the ship. So Corbo just crashes the spaceship into the space station. Meanwhile, Storm's outside, and she somehow is still able to utilize some of her like space storm powers, defeats a Sentinel, and then heads on into the ship. Back on the ship, Colossus is beating the shit. I mean, Colossus, Cyclops, and Nightcrawler are beating the living shit out of these Sentinels. And they're talking about how easy this is. And that clearly there is like, these second-gen Sentinels are pieces of shit compared to the ones they fought before. So like, no worries. Colossus starts freaking out that Storm's dying outside, and then she shows up and's like, chill, I'm fine. Then Cyclops gets a heads up from Jean, and she's like, help! Me and Corbo's trying to kill me, and Professor X, we're up here, and Banshee and Wolverine are down in this other floor. And so Cyclops commands Storm, Nightcrawler, and Colossus to go rescue Wolverine and Banshee while he goes to rescue Jean. And then we get another addition from the classic. We see Wolverine and Banshee like all sewn up in some contraptions while these like yokels are talking about stabbing Wolverine with like a pocket knife. And right then the rest of the X-Men show up, and it straight up says Wolverine gets broken out of his cage by Colossus and kills one of them. Meanwhile, Corbell is complaining about his ability to make sentinels to Jean and Professor X, who are in tubes, when Cyclops comes busting in, rescues Jean, and then almost murders Lang until Jean stops him. But then he gets zapped from behind. And Lang's like, oh! And then Jean turns around and she's like, no, how is it possible? The rest of the X-Men are charging up to help with the battle, and they run into the X-Men, right? So we have Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Banshee, Storm, and Colossus, and they're fighting Cyclops, Jean, Angel, Beast, Iceman, and Professor X. So what is going on? We don't know. We'll find out next episode. Then we get this like very radical like side story from the classic. And so we go back to the Hellfire Club. We meet Lords, who I don't remember ever reading about or hearing about, but that apparently is Shaw's like first love, and she was like the original Black Queen. And her ability is teleportation, like Nightcrawler. So they're dancing at this like gala they're throwing, and then Lords, and then Tessa. I remember Tessa is the spy from Professor X who can like read. She's like a telepath of some sort. She can like read emotions or something. I can't remember exactly what her powers are, but both of them are like, you need to not trust Ned. He's trying to kill all mutants. And he's like, whatever. I trust him. He's helped me. He's like a good friend. Blah blah blah. And then Emma. I think it's the first time we get her. Emma Frost, who's the White Queen. I'm trying to remember. I don't think she has like a nickname. She's just Emma Frost. She's like a smoking hot blondie chica. She's with Colonel Rossi. Remember Colonel Rossi's the one Lang killed like all those like a while ago. And Lang, Rossi is like, she was like able to make him not be totally dead. And she essentially reveals the same thing, that the whole thing, that Ned is not trying to help mutants, he's trying to kill all mutants. And that's like enough for Shaw, so he's had enough. And then Emma gets attacked by a sentinel, and she's like, oh no, a sentinel. So then Shaw runs back, grabs Lords, and it's like, teleport us over there. And she's like, I don't know if I can. And he like grabs her by the neck, like real asshole. And she does. She teleports them all there. And this is where we first meet the guy who can manipulate mass, like make people weigh a lot or weigh a little, like increase their mass. What is his name? I'll remember in a minute. Anyway, so Shaw's running around, and Shaw's power, and this is, you know, the first time we kind of get this, is the more you hit him, the stronger he gets. He like he gathers like kinetic energy. It's kind of like Bishop, which we get to him later. So he's fighting, and then he gets like caught by the Sentinel before he can strong enough to like really destroy the thing. And so Tessa goes and like teleports him, and then she gets like speared in the back by the Sentinel. Like she gets speared dead. And that's when the mask guy, Harry something, he uses his powers to like make the Sentinel crash into the ground, and Shaw's able to go finally fucking destroy it. And then Harry almost has a heart attack because he's a big fatso. And then Shaw destroys Sentinel, and then he like cries over his lady love Lords, and she talks about Barcelona while it's raining. It's very dramatic, kind of sad. And then they kiss, and you know, Harry and Emma and Tessa are all very like sad about the whole situation. So then Shaw declares they're going to destroy the leadership of the Hellfire Club. So later that night, they somehow got all the way back over here. Maybe they just drove. Shaw mentioned that Rossi was being held at his beach house. So if they're in New York, maybe his beach house is in Long Island. I would guess, because they get there later tonight. And then Ned walks up to one of like the guards in the Hellfire Club, pulls out a gun and just shoots everybody, kills everybody, including his like White Queen wife. And he's almost about to kill himself when Shaw and Emma walk in, and he's like, "Aha, you dumbass! I turned off all the telepathic resistors in the area, so Emma's been controlling you. But I'm not going to let you kill yourself because that's my job." And then he breaks his neck and is like, the king is dead, and the council is gone. So now it is time for the Lords Cardinal to rule the Hellfire Club and then the world. The Battle of the X-Men begins. There's a lot of back and forth fighting. It's pretty cool. And while Stephen Lang is watching on a video camera or a video screen, laughing and enjoying himself, we get a lot of punchy punch and punchy back and forth with the X-Men. let's see. Yeah, so that goes on for quite a bit. And at some point, Xavier gets up and like punches Wolverine all the way into a back wall. So clearly something's amiss. And then Jean Grey tries to do something with Wolverine, and he recognizes finally that that is not actually Jean Grey, that it's a machine. So he kills her. And everyone's like, it was like, oh, it's a machine. And then Link's like, no, how could my new powerful Sentinel X-Men be destroyed by the actual X-Men? And then he gets some more bad news. And that bad news is the whole base is like coming apart because of all the fighting between the Sentinels and the X-Men. So it's getting real bad. And so the negatubes that Cyclops, Jean Grey, Corbo, and Professor X are all hanging out in, they start to like not be able to inhibit mutant powers anymore, and so Cyclops is able to finally like blast his way right out of there, and then he rescues everybody else at the same time. This leaves Stephen Lang to be like ruh-roh, so he runs off to get in his little like doohickey gunship or whatever, and then he starts fighting with like the X-Men and everyone else, and Jean Grey and Cyclops and Corbo meet up with the rest of the X-Men, and they're killing all the machines, and he's got like his little gunship, and then at some point he like crashes his gunship. But Jean Grey saves him, but then not so much because the whole place starts to explode, and they have to like escape. They head out to the ship. The ship's pretty damaged, and there's really nothing they could honestly do about it. So they're kind of screwed because the autopilot's jacked up, and then there's the solar flares, and so even if Stephen Lang is able to like fly the ship, he's gonna die from like the radiation. So they're in like a very precarious situation at this time. But then Jean says, "Hold up," and she steals like the knowledge how to fly the plane from Corbo, and then she's like, "I can use my telekinetic shield to protect myself from the radiation." And Cyclops is like, "No, you will not." And then so she knocks him out. And Betty takes her away, and then she gets like a talking to from like all her new best friends forever. And so she goes to fly, and Cyclops is being held down by Nightcrawler and Colossus, and they're like in a little radiation chamber in the middle of the aircraft. And then Jean Grey is getting hit with the solar flare, and she's like dying real fast. And then we get to the classic portion of this, where we get like the Phoenix thoughts and the whole matter, and we kind of relive the last few minutes of what just occurred, and Jean talking about how like she's gonna do everything she can, and that she's losing the ability to control herself, and that the radiation is slowly withering her away. And we get like some very intense graphics of her like literally withering away, like her hair falling out. She looks a lot like a zombie. And then all of a sudden the Phoenix shows up, and it's like, "Hello, child, I am here to do something to help you out, or to take your form, or to merge with you, because I am the master of all creation, and we'll be together." And then like zombie Jean is like, "Oh yes, I agree, I'll do anything to save my friends and to save my life." And so then her spirit merges with the Phoenix spirit, and then she's like got this whole new awareness. Like she's definitely not the Jean Grey before. She's like this new form, which is more Phoenix than Jean Grey. And then she looks at the body of Jean Grey, and she's like, "Oh, there's still a spark of life and spirit in there." So she creates like a cocoon for her to like exist in. And this is a huge retcon, by the way. None of this was even close to what happened originally, but it comes up later, and it is what it is. So then she's no longer Jean Grey. She is the Phoenix. This issue opens up with the plane crashing down into the Earth as fast as possible, and we see a little bit of kind of the Phoenix effect on Jean Grey. But as they come toppling down onto the Earth, they hit like the landing site where they're supposed to be landing, and then they bounce into the water, and they bounce again, and the ship like crashes, and there's like oil spill and everything. We see Cyclops and the other X-Men like pop out of the water, and they're like, "Oh," Cyclops is like, "I gotta go back and get Jean. Where's Jean?" And Kurt's like, "No, she's dead, brother. You can't be doing that." And he's like, "No, fuck you. You don't let me go save her before. I'm gonna do it now." And then all of a sudden, Jean Grey pops out of the water, and with her Phoenix garb, her like green outfit, and she's full of flame, and she's like, "Behold, X-Men! I am not the woman you once knew. I am power incarnate." And then she passes out. So they grab her and drag her out. And everyone survives, but they all get to sorry, excuse me, to like Cape Canaveral or whatever they're at, and they Kurt uses his thing that lets him look human to hide everybody except Corbo, so they can like be a sneakopotamus and get the GTFO. And then Storm also uses like fog and whatever, and so Corbo comes out, he's like, "Oh, I'm the only survivor. We were attacked by terrorists up in the space station, and no one survived but me," and oh, yada yada. And then the rest of the X-Men, they like they use their powers. Well, mostly Professor X uses powers to get, you know, once they escape, they get into a limo and they take the limo to the hospital and get Jean like admitted so she can be taken care of. And then we just get some like sad scenes. We get Wolverine, who's like, I don't know what the deal with that Jean Grey is, but she stirs my heart, and I sure want to bang the shit out of her. I'm gonna buy her some flowers. So he buys some flowers and goes up to the hospital, and of course the whole team's there. Like, and Wolverine is like, oh, so he just like throws the flowers away. And then there's like a comment. It's like, well, maybe Wolverine didn't realize these people would be there for her because he never had real friends. It's like, burn, son. Damn. We learned that's not true. But, you know, for now, I guess we don't really know much about Wolverine if you don't know if this is coming out live. Cyclops is really like sad-eponymous. Everyone's pretty sad-eponymous. But then Corbeau, I guess, is fine now and is like doing surgery or something, and this other doctor, they roll out and they're like, Jean's gonna be okay, and everyone's like, yay, and then Cyclops goes to a room to be by himself and like cry it out like a little bitch, but Kurt catches him and he's like, ooh, I'm gonna let him just do that, and he's like, oh, Cyclops will be with us in a minute. So then Professor X is like, hey, I'm gonna send you all on mandatory vacation because Jean's gonna recover and Cyclops or Scott and I will be here to like help her recover, but the rest of you need to like GTFO so that we can concentrate on that and you just get a break from fucking going to space and fighting Sentinels and shit. And at first, like, Wolverine's like, oh, fuck you, I do what I want. But then Banshee, Sean, is like, hey, I just got a letter from my solicitor that's a lawyer in, like, British talk. And I inherited the castle, Cassidy Keep. So let's go check that out. And everyone's like, ooh, Cassidy Keep, that sounds fun. Let's go find this castle. So they all, you know, Professor X helps them, like, set up a travel. And just the X-Men, Moira sticks behind too, I guess, to help out with the recovery. But Sean and Aurora, Peter, Kurt, and Logan, or I guess he's not called Logan yet, and Wolverine, they all head to Scotland, and then they're taking like this bumpy ride, and Wolverine's like, the fuck, and then Aurora's like, why don't we just fly, this is awful, and then Sean's like laughing, and he's like, oh, don't you worry, this is a great ride, we're all gonna have a good time. It's like these old country roads, and they get to like this giant castle that's on top of a cliff, like overlooking a cliff, and it's like, holy shit, and Kurt's like literally Kurt's like, damn, that's a big castle, and he's like, oh yeah, and he tells like, Sean tells some crazy story about how something, and then we get more of the Black Tom character, like, talking to the butler, I guess, who works at the castle, and he's like, you better not tell Sean that I'm gonna fucking trap him and fuck him over, because if you do, I'll kill your family. And the man's like, oh, you're a bastard, Black Tom, why don't you just stop being such a bastard? And then he like whacks him with his stick and he's like, get out of here. And so he goes, and then Black Tom is talking to somebody else, and he's like, you see, we'll get all of them, and it'll be a good trap, and it'll be fun. So so then we get a shot of Aurora hanging out and like getting dressed really prettily, and then Kurt like wanders in and does like some fun stuff with his like image inducer or whatever. And you know, there's a little flirty there, and they head out, and then Peter and Kurt are both trying to like smooze on Aurora, and she's like, gentlemen, I belong to no one, how about you both calm the fuck down? And then Sean is literally just like wearing a turtleneck. Everyone else, and Wolverine's wearing like his normal like flannel buttoned up shirt, buttoned halfway down so you can see his manly hairy chest, and jeans and like a cowboy hat. But everyone else is dressed up like super nice because they're gonna have like a fine meal in this palace, this like big old castle. Except they fall down a pit trap and all land, and there's Black Tom sitting on like some underground throne with a Juggernaut standing there, and they're like, oh, I'm here to kill you, Sean. And then Sean's like, fuck you, Black Tom, you're an asshole, my cousin, because they're cousins. And then Juggernaut's like, and I will kill the X-Men, and it's like, dud. So the side story for this issue, it's like Uncanny X-Men 101, I want to say. Classic X-Men number 9. It's about Kurt. So while Kurt is like sad-eponymous about Jean, and they're kind of hanging out waiting for her to get better, he goes for like a little walksies, and he bumps into this kid who just looks all sad-eponymous outside the hospital. And he talks to him about like his parents, and then he tries to cheer the kid up, so he takes him to get a meal, and they wander around a little bit, and then the kid runs into like Central Park, and Kurt like chases him around, and like, you know, some fun stuff. And then Kurt eventually, you know, talks the kid into like accepting life and like whatever else is going on, and going to visit his parent, going back home. So he walks into his home, and then he's like, hey, let me show you something. And he turns back into Nightcrawler, like his normal form. The kid's like, wow, that's so cool. And they hug it out, and Nightcrawler's like, hey man, if you ever need it, I'll be here for you. I'll be your friend. And then he goes away. And then the next day he shows up at the hospital because like the kid was at the hospital seeing somebody, quote unquote, and he's like, "Hey nurse, I'm looking for like David Cameron or whatever." And the nurse is like, "Oh yeah, David Cameron, he died of cancer yesterday." And Kurt's like, "The fuck?" And like, "Yeah, he's right here. It's his dead body. We're like pushing away right now, just down the hall in this hospital, dead body." That's so dumb. And Kurt's like, "Oh my gosh, it was a ghost I hung out with last night. And was that ghost? Was I helping the ghost? It was the ghost helping me." And he looks like fondly out into like the New York skyline. Good stuff. Ooh, the Juggernaut is mad, and he kicks the shit out of Colossus and Wolverine. Storm is curled up in a corner. Juggernaut's fighting Colossus, Wolverine, and Nightcrawler, while Banshee goes to fight Black Tom. Black Tom is the cousin of Sean Cassidy, the Banshee, and their powers do not work against each other, so they just fucking punch each other. Meanwhile, the rest of the X-Men keep trying to get Aurora to come out of her, like, losing her mind, and while at the same time trying to fight off Juggernaut, which somebody none of them have fought before. The only person familiar with is Sean, who, not relents. He kind of is, he's like, "Oh no, we're in a lot of trouble because this guy, he's like really invincible and we don't have any telepaths here to help us," which is how the X-Men have beat him before. We're in a lot of trouble. So we get a lot of that. We get a lot of them fighting, and Nightcrawler tries to get Storm out of her revelry. And Juggernaut picks her up and tosses her aside while he's chasing after Nightcrawler. And we finally get Storm's like background. We see that she was born to like loving parents in Africa, and that her parents traveled throughout the Middle East and Africa, and then at some point they were somewhere, like I think in, I don't know where, but there was like a civil war or some sort of battle going on, and then her parents were trying to run away, and they got caught in like a plane crash. And this is where Storm was buried alive with her dead parents for a long time before she was able to escape. And when she finally escaped, she was picked up by the King of Thieves, Ahmed El Gabar, and taught the thieving trade. But when she got a little older and started developing her mutant powers, she took off and like traveled around the Sahara and to Mount Kilimanjaro and stuff, and finally became like Storm. And the tribes worshipped her there, and she became like their storm goddess. And eventually Professor X came. At this point, we switch back over to Professor X and Cyclops and Jean and Misty Knight, who's visiting Jean. And Jean's woken up, and she's doing all right. But Professor X is freaking out because he's like, "Scott, I need to see you right now." And so they go, and then Jean says some really like cryptic shit to Misty about being dead and brought back to life. We don't dwell on that too much, though. Professor X and Scott get into a fight outside down the hall, talking about how Cyclops needs to go help the X-Men. And then Cyclops refuses because he's going to stay with Jean. And then Xavier has like he sees Lilandria again. Only he doesn't know that's her yet, and he's like seeing space and spaceships chasing each other, and she's like reaching out to him, and he's losing his mind. He has a seizure, and Moira comes over to help him, and Scott's like, "You're more than meets the eye," and she's like, "True, but we're not going to talk about it," which we don't. So back to the battle at hand at Cassidy Keep. Wolverine gets slapped around by Juggernaut. He gets knocked out. Nightcrawler gets knocked down into like the corner, and then gets picked up by some elves. Or leprechauns. This is Scotland, right? Or Ireland? I don't know. Anyway, so he gets picked up by some creatures, by little creatures who drag him off. Meanwhile, Black Tom is able to finally knock Banshee down. Colossus and Juggernaut keep going at it, but eventually Juggernaut defeats Colossus, and then Aurora tries to blast Juggernaut at the last minute, which he reflects. And then we find out that they were paid by somebody to capture the X-Men, and Kane Marco, the Juggernaut, just wants to kill his half-brother. They met in prison. They got broken out, and now they're going to set a trap for Professor X to come rescue his X-Men, and they're all laughing about it real hard. Then we get the side story, and the side story is kind of silly. It's about Wolverine, and he's just wandering around New York talking to himself about stuff, and he senses a presence, and the presence like sneaks up on him and like tags him from behind, and it's like, "Tag, motherfucker!" And then Wolverine and this guy they go around and around, and then Wolverine kind of explains his like bestial powers and his ability to just like sense things and smell things and all this stuff. And he sees he sees a lot of like creepy stuff. And then this woman is like trying to flirt with him, and he runs outside trying to find whoever this presence is. And she's like, "You're a real animal." And then he wanders off, and then she gets killed. And Wolverine's like, "Oh, that guy killed him because it was taunting me." And so then he goes to the subway and like jumps on a subway train. takes it out of the city to Battery, not out of the city, down south to Battery Park, gets his Wolverine gear on, and stands there waiting for this individual to come. And then the individual like grabs something behind, pulls like tears his throat apart, and throws him into the Hudson. Is that the Hudson or the East River? Anyway, and later, when after he's recovered with his superior healing power, he pulls himself up on the Staten Island ferry and thinks about Sabretooth. That's who it was. It was Sabretooth all along. That's right. And Sabretooth, I think this is the era when Sabretooth is supposed to be his dad at some level, because the comment he gets right before he drowns is "expected better, boy," but you're always a disappointment. Good stuff. And then Wolverine just kind of feels sad about not being better. So issue, what is this? Classic number 11, which is 103, I think. Anyway, it picks up with the leprechauns. I guess that's what they are. Carrying Nightcrawler through some tunnels in the chamber, and we get a recap of the fall of the X-Men to Juggernaut and Black Tom. Then Nightcrawler wakes up and he's like, "Oh, what's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, hey, what's up, homie? We're leprechauns. We came to rescue." And then we meet O'Donnell, who's a friend of the family. He's the one who Black Tom like threatened his family earlier. He's in charge of the little people, I guess, who run Cassidy Keep. And he tells him that there was a crazy Norse guy with red armor who kidnapped their families and threatened them to work for them instead of working for Sean. And Nightcrawler's like, "Is it Eric the Red? Oh my goodness." Then the leprechaun's like, "Oh no, Black Tom's about to torture all your friends." So O'Donnell and Nightcrawler head up, and they see all the X-Men in like these crazy contraptions. And Black Tom's got some crazy magnetic glove that he's using to torture, giving them like mental pain, which Xavier feels all the way across the world. And he's still having visions of Lilandria, and Morio's trying to comfort him. So Nightcrawler uses a little device that lets him look human to look like Charles. He then goes up and uses his like gymnastics ability to fight Juggernaut and Black Tom and cause Juggernaut to like punch a hole in the wall, which causes an explosion in Cassidy Keep, which releases everybody. So then Storm's able to like free Colossus, who then and Wolverine to some extent, while Nightcrawler gets caved in upon by all the junk. Aurora uses her Colossus can't release Wolverine from his like booties, his little metal booties, but Aurora uses her I was the greatest thief in Cairo powers to release Wolverine, and they chase after Black Tom and Juggernaut, who have captured Banshee, and they're about to toss him off the top of the tower when Storm flies off. Colossus tosses Wolverine up on top of the castle, and Colossus starts climbing. Apparently the Eric the Red, or I don't know, did Black Tom put a whole bunch of like laser guns on the top of the castle? And so they start firing at Aurora, and she's flying around, causing like storms and stuff. Colossus is trying to climb up. Juggernaut's trying to throw a rock at him, and the storms keep getting worse and worse. Wolverine got overthrown, and so now he's trying to get back to the fight. And one of the Leprechauns calls him Logan, which is the first time that comes up, which, from what I remember, is not supposed to happen for quite a while. But Logan/Wolverine is like very shocked. This is clearly part of the classic redo. So Nightcrawler frees Banshee, and then Banshee screams into the ground. So Juggernaut like falls down into the keep. Then the other Wolverine and Colossus Storm go to fight him. Black Tom leads Banshee on like a merry chase, and they start having like a sword/axe fight. And eventually Banshee is about to get killed with an axe when he kicks Black Tom off the edge of the castle, and he plummets into like the seas. And Juggernaut freaks out because Tom is, what did he say? He's the only friend I've ever had. And so he leaps out into the water to rescue him. And then Storm gets rid of the storm. We then get a little shot of Eric the Red talking to somebody, and he mentions Lilandria finally, so we can start using her name, Princess Lilandria. It's her older brother who's crazy. We'll find out more about that later. But he's like, "Eric the Red, this is the last failure you're going to have." And he's like, "Oh, don't worry, I'm going to bring back an enemy that is for sure the oldest and deadliest foe of the X-Men. He'll take care of this, I promise." And then it says, next issue, the gentleman's name is Magneto. So, of course, Magneto's coming. All right, then the side story. It's kind of weird. It's called Hope. It stars this guy called Philip, who's like a writer of some sort in England, and he's very depressed, and he's like, all right, time to die. So he climbs up this tower to kill himself, and then Aurora catches him, and she tries to talk him out of it, and then she takes him for like a little jaunt through the air, and they fly around, and then he's like talking about how it's still his life, and without being a writer, without the ability to be a writer, he has nothing left, so he's still going to do it. And then he turns around, and this guy dressed up like a Bobby, like an English policeman, like has knocked her out with a club, and he's like, "Oh no, it's that guy who's been like killing women in the streets and stuff." And the guy's like, "Go ahead, kill yourself. I'm going to take care of this lady." And then Philip finally grows a pair, and he runs down and starts fighting this guy, but this guy's beating the shit out of him. Luckily, Aurora like wakes up enough to shock him and throw him into like a metal girder. They then continue to have their conversation about not killing himself, and it leaves it very ambiguous. So there you go. That was weird. Uncanny X-Men number 104 / Classic X-Men number 12 begins with Sean arguing with some boat guy about a boat that Moira rented or commissioned to take people back and forth to her lab. And because they're not Moira, even though they're the X-Men, he's like, "Go fuck yourselves." Colossus hangs them on the wall, and they take the hovercraft anyway. They get close to Moira's lab, and the hovercraft explodes. People are thrown from the boat. Aurora is thrown into the water. Wolverine has to dive in, breathe into her mouth, and save her. And Banshee grabs Nightcrawler, and they're all able to come up to shore. We then get Magneto, who obviously is the one who destroyed the hovercraft, and he's just hanging out in Moira's lab, chillaxing. He's looking at a picture of Moira, him, and Professor X, and he's holding some weird statue, or this golden thing that looks like as a head of the head of Charles, but I think he I don't know what this thing is. I think he formed it that way, and then he crushes it, and he talks about how the X-Men are worthy of fighting with him. The X-Men then roll up onto shore, and they're in a barrier, and the land lifts off, and it gets thrown up towards the lab. At the last minute, Banshee's able to blow through the land, and they're all able to escape. But then, dun dun dun, Magneto appears, blasting through the door, yelling he's Magneto. We switch back over to Cyclops and Moira, who have just landed at the lab on their own, unbeknownst to Magneto, clearly. And Cyclops is worried because of all the stuff going on, and he's putting two and two together. And then we meet for the first time Jamie Maddox. Jamie Maddox is heavily involved with X Factor later on, and he's an assistant to Moira. His mutant power is that when he gets hit, he creates a double. His nickname's the Multiple Man. He then recalls how Eric the Red showed up with Lorna Dane and Havoc, and that they knocked him out and then released Magneto, and that Magneto was a baby, and that Eric the Red aged Magneto back up, and he was even stronger. They talked for a while, Magneto and Eric the Red, about how they want to destroy the X-Men, and then instances occurred. Cyclops is starting to put two and two together, and he's like, "I have to go help the X-Men." So he runs off, and the X-Men are having a real struggle against Magneto, partially because Colossus and Wolverine are metal, and it's very easy for him to take care of. Magneto's magnetic powers also deal with electricity, which is lightning from storms, so he's able to take care of her. And Nightcrawler gets beat pretty quick because he doesn't have much going on besides teleportation. Banshee's the only one who's really able to kind of fend for himself with his screeches. He's blown up the ground underneath Magneto. Magneto starts flying. They go back and forth, and then at the last minute, Magneto covers him with really small pieces of metal and creates a tomb for him. At this point, Magneto's gloating, and Cyclops comes in and blasts him real good. He then rescues the other X-Men and drags them all out of there, and they make an escape. And Wolverine's giving him a hard time, telling him, "You're making us all cowards, you asshole, blah, blah, blah." And Cyclops says, "Listen, you dumbass." And he explains that Eric the Red keeps going for Professor X, and that obviously all the X-Men are here being distracted by Magneto because they need to go rescue Professor X, because Eric the Red is clearly going to that. And then Wolverine's like, "Yeah, all right, that's fair." I'll still never forgive you. The Wolverine never forgives. Magneto then is so happy because it's the first time he's actually beat the X-Men, and he's gloating to himself. And as he wanders off, we see a little door that says Mutant X, no admittance. And the narrator's like, "Ruh-roh, that's a story for another time." We then bounce around a little bit. We go to space, and we meet the Space Jammers, or the Star Jammers, for the first time. And they see the human captain and some aliens. And then we see Lalandra flying in her ship, and she's being targeted by an Imperial cruiser. And then we get Professor X with Misty Knight and Jean Grey talking to Jean's parents. And lastly, we get Eric the Red looking in through the window with Havoc and Lorna Dane and being like, "Aha, this is it. Time for Professor X to die." The B plot is all about Magneto, and it's Magneto laying in bed in Paris, and he can't sleep, and he's having nightmares about the time he was in his concentration camp with a woman named Magda, and how he helped her escape, and then they lived in the woods, and eventually they made it to they built a cabin in the mountains and became friendly with all the villagers, and they got married and had a daughter named Anya. Magneto was a very intelligent person, so he desired to seek more knowledge, so they moved to a city where he could, in Ukraine, which is under Soviet occupation at this time, to go to school, I think, to learn more, and to and then Magda's like, "Oh, everyone's looking at us weird," and Magneto's like, "Yeah, it's because we're country bumpkins, we'll be okay." And Magneto has an issue with some Soviet guy where he's not paying him as much as he should, and his powers start to manifest at this point. They've never manifested before this point, which is a little odd because he's a little older, and usually the mutant powers manifest teenagers, but not important. Magneto comes back to the inn where him and his family are staying, and it's on fire, so he rushes in to rescue Magda, but Anya is stuck on the second floor, and as the building starts to collapse, Magneto instinctively uses like his magnetic shield to protect them. And then he goes to rescue Anya, but then he gets grabbed by the Soviet like police who are beating him and talking about how he screwed over this like party member who's a real asshole. And he's like, let me risk my daughter and you can do whatever you want. And they're like, no, fuck you, this is your fault. And then Magneto kills everybody. Except Magda. Just kills them all. And then Magda sees this and freaks out, and she's obviously lost a child, and now her husband's like a monster, and she runs away. And Magneto is very sad about it. And he wakes up being like, oh, God damn it, Magda. I loved you and you loved me, but you turned on me, and I can't trust humans and stuff. And then he smells smoke and goes out to the window and sees that a building across the way is on fire, and there's a woman with her child in the window. And he's like, this is no concern of mine. They're just human. And then, it's Magneto. He's conflicted. he's a complex character now. He's not like the ridiculous supervillain he was before. Even in the, even before like the classic renditions and some of his other stuff, like in regular Uncanny X-Men at this point, he's a little more nuanced. He becomes way more nuanced later on. But anyway, so he decides to use his powers to go rescue the woman and the daughter, and then he says, she's like, tell me, I'll do anything for you. Like the man who's, the father is like, thank you so much. And Magneto says, tell everyone that it was Magneto the terrorist, the supervillain who rescued your family. And then the man says, you may be all those things, but I don't care because you proved yourself a man. Oh, that's such a good fucking line. It's fantastic. So the last thing we're going to talk about as part of the Phoenix Rises arc is from Iron Fist, number 14. Iron Fist, he was in the TV show, but it's not represented. He's this guy who has like the superhuman power of like his Iron Fist, plus he's really good at martial arts and stuff. Danny Rand, he's like a rich guy. Anyway, so he's spending time with one of his girls in Canada, and he runs into Sabretooth. And this is like the real first time we get Sabretooth. Now, in the classic X-Men, if we're going by that timeline, we obviously ran into Sabretooth when he was fucking around with Wolverine a few issues back, but this is like the first time he actually shows up. And he's like a pirate, and he's running this crew where he's trying to like blackmail Danny Rand, who's super wealthy, into, stuff, and Colleen Wing, who's like his girl, who's not a superhero, but she's kind of like a Misty Knight character, where she's like a street vigilante kind of type character slash like a Black Widow style character. So anyway, so Danny fights Sabretooth a little bit, but he gets knocked out and captured. And then, shenanigans. Colleen kind of escapes. I think it was Colleen. Anyway, so she escapes, and then Danny, as Iron Fist, dresses up, knocks out one of Sabretooth's guys and dresses up like him, and then they go fight. And Sabretooth, this is, establishes right away that he's got claws, that he's, very strong, very fast. But he doesn't have a lot of skill. It's like all brute force. And so that, of course, is how, through like an extended fight scene, which is very good and very fun to like read through and watch, Sabretooth like tricks him into coming outside for the sunrise so that he goes blind, and then he scratches him from behind and he hurts him really bad. And then Danny wants to use the Iron Fist, but if he misses or doesn't like knock him out, then he'll be like done because it takes so much of his energy and he's already kind of tapped out. And so Danny pulls upon the remembrance of like when he was getting trained in like How Long, I think is where he got trained. About not, using all his senses. So then he's able to kind of match Sabretooth, and because of his martial arts prowesses, which Sabretooth doesn't have, he's able to beat up on him. And then I don't think he even uses the Iron Fist. He just punches on him a whole bunch and then finally like knocks him out, which is, obviously Sabretooth is much stronger later on when it comes to like his healing factor and stuff, but I think they kind of like wave it away. There's like further mutations or something. Anyway, so they knock him out and they capture all the people, and, Danny Rand and Colleen and yeah, it is Colleen. They win. And so that really has nothing to do with like the X-Men story, the Phoenix Rises arc, but it like comes out right here. So we're just going to throw it in here. Cool. So that's it for the Phoenix Rises arc. It's all about, the Phoenix kind of like establishing stuff. It's kind of like, it's hard to call it like a real arc, but it kind of builds the X-Men, shows them, gets kind of the plot moving before we hit like the Phoenix Saga, which is like the interspatial stuff that's going on. So it's really good. The Claremont era starts strong with the second generation stuff and then continues strong for a while. They have these like arcs that are like fantastic, which are much more well defined than the original Uncanny X-Men run, and that just encompass a lot of great storylines. And this start of like the Phoenix kind of saga, which I'll probably break the actual Phoenix saga into 2 or 3 parts because it's a lot of issues of stuff. is very good. And it all kind of begins its establishment right here. So cool. Yeah. So go ahead and like, share, subscribe, and I will catch you guys all later. Bye.